In the muted bustle of central London, where ambition clung to every office wall like the lingering scent of burnt coffee, the Whitmore and Company law chambers thrummed with an unusual anticipation. The corridors, typically lined with clipped footsteps and hurried conversations, now whispered of a return, not a grand announcement, but a quiet homecoming that unsettled the staff more than any thunderclap might have. It was Margaret Whitmore who had returned. Known to some with reverence and to others with a tinge of unease as Grandma Margaret, she had been absent from the firm for 3 long months. Her disappearance had sparked speculation across Fleet Street. Some swore she had gone abroad to oversee discreet investments, others whispered of illness. But those who truly knew her, or rather, feared her sharp mind, understood she was never idle. She had been plotting, calculating, preparing. And at the center of her thoughts had been her grandson, Edward. Edward Whitmore remained a mystery even within his own inheritance. The firm had long murmured about him, a man supposedly brilliant, discreet, perhaps even dangerously clever, yet unseen by most of the employees whose futures would one day be steered by his hand. A handful of secretaries whispered by the copy machine, their eyes bright with gossip. "They say he's terribly handsome," murmured one, as if uttering a spell. "And richer than half the city combined," another added, her voice tinged with envy. None of them, however, guessed the truth of his impending arrival. For Edward was not to march in as a commanding heir. No, he would slip in quietly, disguised as a lowly trainee solicitor, the kind easily forgotten in a sea of fresh recruits. And Margaret? She had stripped away her pearls and tailored suits, donning plain clothes, her expensive Cartier watch swapped for a market stall imitation. She had returned not as matriarch, but as the newest cleaner in the building, armed with a mop and a sharp eye. Her mission was peculiar, yet to her mind, essential. She intended to find someone worthy of Edward's heart. Not a woman dazzled by wealth or status, but one who would love him with honesty. The very morning Margaret slipped back into the firm, the air shifted. As she pushed open the glass doors with her mop bucket trailing behind, a group of junior solicitors looked her up and down with disdain. "Who let her in?" one sneered, brows arched. "Trying to look posh with that tacky knockoff." Another laughed loudly, drawing the attention of others in the lobby. Margaret said nothing. Years had taught her that silence carried more weight than any retort. But when one woman shoved her backwards, nearly sending her sprawling, a firm voice cut through the sneers. "That's enough." All turned to see a young woman step forward, arms crossed with quiet authority. She was Amelia Clark, a junior associate, her tone calm yet edged with steel. "She's doing her job," Amelia said coolly. "You, on the other hand, are bullies. Best find some real work to occupy yourselves." The offenders scoffed, muttering barbed remarks about Amelia's recent breakup. She did not flinch. "I left him," she stated plainly. "I don't chase cowards. It's called self-respect. You might try it." One by one, the group dissolved into embarrassed silence. Margaret, her lips curving into the faintest smile, regarded Amelia with a newfound interest. Later that afternoon, Margaret found her at her desk, surrounded by case files. "May I steal a moment of your time?" she asked, her tone light. "Of course," Amelia replied kindly. Margaret leaned in, mischief twinkling in her eyes. "Would you consider marrying my grandson?" Amelia blinked, then laughed uncertainly, assuming it was a joke. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm not exactly looking for love. Not after the mess my last relationship left behind." "Heartbreak at your age," Margaret said gently, "is too heavy a burden." Amelia hesitated, then confided a little. Her ex, a fellow lawyer, had betrayed her both in love and in professional pride. Margaret listened with unusual tenderness. "My grandson is not like that," she promised. "He lost his parents young. I raised him. He is loyal, kind, and quietly remarkable." Before Amelia could reply, the door opened. A man entered with an unassuming air, but his presence was difficult to ignore. His eyes held both gentleness and strength. "Grandma," he said softly. Margaret's face lit with warmth. "Edward, there you are." Amelia's breath caught. So this was the grandson. He extended his hand humbly. "Edward, just starting here as a trainee." Amelia shook it, cheeks warming against her will. Margaret, still in her disguise, watched quietly from the corner, a plan already unfolding in her heart. Edward Whitmore blended into Whitmore and Company as though he had always belonged among the ranks of eager trainees. With his modest suit, quiet manner, and trainee badge clipped neatly to his lapel, He was indistinguishable from the other hopefuls who carried coffers for partners and spent late nights chasing footnotes through case law. To most, he was another anonymous recruit. Yet beneath the disguise lay a weighty truth. He was the heir to the firm, its future principal, observing the culture from ground level. Edward's approach surprised even Margaret. He never demanded attention. He listened. He studied. He absorbed everything with a sharp mind disguised beneath a calm exterior. Most importantly, he drew steadily closer to Amelia Clark. It was Margaret, of course, who ensured their paths crossed more than coincidence would allow. Though dressed in a janitor's overalls, her quiet maneuvers resembled those of a seasoned strategist. It was she who recommended Amelia and Edward work together on a case assignment. It was she who lingered in the corridors, mop in hand, whenever the two were left alone in conference rooms late at night. Their first collaboration came on a demanding brief involving a high-profile commercial dispute. Edward, though ostensibly inexperienced, revealed a startling knack for analysis. "You're remarkably quick with this," Amelia remarked one evening, leaning back in her chair after hours of drafting. "I read a great deal," he replied modestly, though his eyes flickered with warmth as they met hers. "And I learn best from people who know what they are doing." The compliment hung in the air. She blushed faintly but pressed on with her work, while Margaret, pretending to polish a window just beyond the glass door, allowed herself a satisfied smirk. Days blurred into weeks. Conversations stretched beyond legal jargon into easy laughter. Glances lingered a little longer. Edward's presence became Amelia's quiet refuge, and Amelia's resilience became Edward's admiration. Yet romance is never left untested. One evening, Amelia's mobile rang with her mother's number flashing across the screen. She stepped into the corridor, her voice softening as she answered. "Darling," came her mother's cheerful tone. "When are you bringing your boyfriend home? You promised me I'd meet him before the year was out." Amelia forced a smile, though her heart dipped. "Soon, Mum. I promise." She ended the call, the truth gnawing at her. She had no boyfriend, no fiancé, only the memory of betrayal and the faint beginnings of something she dared not name with Edward. The following morning, the office buzzed with an energy of another sort. A rumor, this time far grander than Margaret's return, coursed through the building. The elusive head of the firm, Mr. Thomas Whitmore, Edward's hidden identity, was rumored to appear. His hand-picking solicitors for his personal team, whispered one secretary by the lift. "Certainly not you, Amelia," sneered Lucy Patterson, a ruthless associate with ambitions as sharp as her stilettos. Her eyes glinted as she leaned close. "You think a nobody like you could ever catch Mr. Whitmore's attention." Amelia bit her tongue, but before she could reply, Edward spoke from behind them. His voice was calm, but his words carried quiet fire. "That's enough. You don't have the right to belittle anyone here." His eyes lingered on Amelia with quiet conviction. "She's one of the brightest people in this building. If Mr. Whitmore truly values talent, I'm sure he'll notice her before anyone else." Lucy scoffed. "You're just a trainee. Stay in your lane." "Perhaps I am," Edward replied evenly. "But I know this, lifting people up will always be better than dragging them down." Amelia walked away later with a flutter she had not felt in years. Protection, not arrogance. Kindness, not manipulation. For the first time since her heartbreak, she wondered whether affection could grow gently, like sunlight slipping through old blinds. Over the weeks that followed, the gentle light between them brightened. Long evenings became natural, coffee breaks stretched into conversations. Edward, cautious but sincere, finally asked Amelia to dinner. She hesitated only a moment before smiling softly. "I'd like that." But in the shadows of the firm, not all hearts softened. Lucy, watching from across open-plan desks, felt jealousy curdle into determination. Edward, the unremarkable trainee in her eyes, was drawing close to Amelia and, more troublingly, to the attention she craved for herself. And so, Lucy began to plot. The weeks rolled forward at Whitmore and Company, and though Edward and Amelia carried on with their cases, another presence stalked them silently. Lucy Patterson had sharpened her envy into something dangerous. To her mind, Amelia's quiet competence was not simply irritating, it was an obstacle. And obstacles, in Lucy's world, were meant to be removed. She began with small gestures, subtle enough to pass beneath suspicion. A file misplaced here, a deadline shifted there. Nothing that could be pinned to her directly, but enough to make Amelia's life difficult. The tension simmered beneath the firm's polished veneer, unnoticed by most but heavy on Amelia's shoulders. The breaking point arrived one brisk Tuesday morning. Amelia and Edward were scheduled to present a case summary to a major client, an opportunity Amelia had prepared for with meticulous care. She opened the folder of documents in the boardroom, only to freeze. "These aren't the right files," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. Pages were missing, others shuffled out of order. Edward leaned over, scanning the contents with a keen eye. His brow furrowed, then smoothed into focus. "Someone's tampered with this." His tone was low but certain. With seconds to spare, he retrieved the correct documents from the firm's digital archive, his instincts honed by years of hidden leadership. The presentation went ahead smoothly, the clients none the wiser. Amelia delivered her points with clarity, Edward supporting her seamlessly. Outwardly, nothing had gone wrong. But across the room, Luce's smile had tightened into a bitter line. Her plan had failed. Later that afternoon, she cornered Amelia in the corridor. Her voice dripped with venom, pitched low enough for only Amelia to hear. "You're lucky this time," Lucy hissed. "But luck doesn't last. I'll be waiting when you finally trip." Edward, standing a few paces behind, caught every word. He had endured her jabs long enough. That evening, under the sterile glow of the office lights, he gathered a small cluster of colleagues still lingering at their desks. His voice was calm, yet carried weight that drew silence around him. "I need to say something," he began. "I haven't been entirely honest with you all." Laughter bubbled nervously among the group, assuming it a joke. Edward's jaw tightened. "My name is Edward Whitmore. I'm not just a trainee. I came here undercover, to see how this firm truly runs when no one's watching." The laughter ceased, replaced by stunned disbelief. Lucy let out a derisive chuckle. "You, Edward Whitmore. Don't be absurd. What is this, some sort of fantasy? You think you can trick us into believing you're the boss just because you play the saint?" Even Amelia frowned, confusion flickering across her face. She pulled him aside, her voice low and urgent. "Edward, what are you doing? If the real Mr. Whitmore hears of this, you'll be ruined. Please, stop before it goes too far." He met her gaze, steady but weary. "I'm telling you the truth." She shook her head, retreating from the impossible notion. But before she could gather her thoughts, another voice broke in, one Amelia dreaded. Well, Clark," sneered Mark Bennett, her ex-boyfriend and fellow solicitor, who had appeared at the doorway with a smug grin. "First you're dumped, now you're dating a trainee who thinks he's the boss? Standards slipping, aren't they?" Edward's jaw tightened. "Leave her out of this." "Or what?" Mark smirked. "You'll sue me with your imaginary credentials. You're nothing but a fraud." Before Edward could reply, the HR director entered, flanked by security. Her tone was cold. "Mark Bennett, you've been warned before. This is your final strike. You're dismissed, effective immediately." Gasps echoed across the room as Mark's face flushed crimson. He sputtered protests but was swiftly escorted out, his reign of petty cruelty ending in a heartbeat. Still, the damage lingered. Amelia was shaken, not by Mark's departure, but by Edward's revelation. "If you're lying," she whispered to him later, her voice trembling, "the consequences will be worse than you think." Edward laid a hand gently on her arm. "Then let me prove it. Tomorrow. Everything will make sense." That night, he made a call to James Fletcher, his trusted assistant. "Come to the office. Pretend to be me," Edward instructed quietly. James chuckled on the other end. "So this is your grand reveal?" "No," Edward replied. "This is me setting the stage for the truth." The following morning dawned with a peculiar electricity over Whitmore and Company. The air itself seemed charged, as though the entire chambers knew something monumental was about to unfold. Word had spread like wildfire through the barristers' lounge and down the corridors. Mr. Thomas Whitmore, the elusive head of the firm, was finally to make an appearance. At precisely 9 o'clock, the lift doors opened with a soft chime, and out stepped a tall man in a navy suit so precisely tailored it seemed cut from silence itself. His hair was neatly combed, his stride purposeful, his expression measured. James Fletcher, Edward's most loyal aide, playing his part as the principal of Whitmore and Company. "Mr. Whitmore," Lucy Patterson cooed, rushing forward with a practiced smile that had charmed judges and disarmed opponents. "What an honor. I've admired your work for years." James offered a courteous nod. "Thank you. I look forward to seeing what everyone here is capable of." Lucy beamed, mistaking the performance for reality. Around her, staff nearly held their breath, believing they were finally in the presence of their enigmatic leader. From a quiet desk near the back, the Real Edward, still dressed in his modest trainee attire, observed the scene with an unreadable expression. He had expected the charade to sting, but it was Amelia's reaction he sought. She, unlike Lucy, barely looked up from her files. No fluttering eyelashes, no performance of deference. She worked steadily, unimpressed by pomp, and in that moment Edward felt both relief and admiration. Margaret, pushing her mop bucket across the polished floors, took in the scene with keen eyes. She needed no proof beyond Amelia's indifference to power. That, to her, was the sign she had been waiting for. Later that day, Margaret approached Amelia with a hand pressed lightly to her chest, her face pale. "My dear," she said softly, "could you help me sit a moment? I'm feeling a touch faint." Amelia immediately sprang to her side. "Shall I call someone?" "No, no," Margaret replied, lowering herself into a chair. "It isn't something a doctor can cure. It's simply age, and one last wish." Amelia frowned, concern flickering. "What sort of wish?" Margaret gave a knowing, fragile smile. "To see my grandson married before I go. To someone kind. Someone strong. Someone like you." Amelia's breath caught. "Me?" "Yes," Margaret said firmly, though her voice was weak. She reached for Amelia's hand. "He loves you. I see it in his eyes. And you care for him too. That is all that matters." That evening, Amelia sat in her small flat overlooking Clapham Common, her thoughts swirling like the buses outside. She loved Edward. She could admit that now. His gentleness, his honesty, the way he listened as though every word she spoke mattered. But marriage? And so suddenly. Added to that, her own mother had sent yet another message. "When are you bringing your fiancé home? I cannot wait to meet him." The pressure mounted like a storm. Meanwhile, Edward was summoned to Margaret's quarters. He found her lying back against the sofa cushions, her breathing shallow but her eyes sharp. "Grandma," he said, kneeling beside her. "Edward," she whispered theatrically, "time is short. You must marry her soon. She is the one. I've already spoken with her." Edward's heart skipped. "You what?" "You'll thank me later," she murmured, closing her eyes with a faint smile. The following morning, both Edward and Amelia were called into Margaret's modest staff quarters within the building. She looked frailer than ever, her voice a whisper. "You too," she said gently, "make me proud. Before I leave this world, I want to know you're together." There was a long silence. Amelia's eyes brimmed with emotion. Finally, she nodded softly. "All right. I'll do it." She turned to Edward, her voice trembling yet sure. "I've fallen for you. I don't care about money or power. I care about the way you treat me, the way you see me." Edward's throat tightened. He clasped her hand. "Then I promise to spend the rest of my life making you feel loved." The wedding was not lavish. No chandeliers, no strings of pearls, no paparazzi waiting outside. Instead, a simple registry office in Westminster, a few witnesses, 2 hearts bound by sincerity. Amelia wore a modest ivory dress, elegant in its restraint, her natural beauty radiating more than diamonds ever could. Edward, in a crisp dark suit, watched her as though she were a vision he'd conjured from dreams. "Do you, Edward Whitmore, take Amelia Clark?" "I do," he said, voice steady, eyes unwavering. "And do you, Amelia Clark?" "I do." And just like that, beneath the approving gaze of Margaret, who despite her claimed frailty looked unusually spry, they were pronounced husband and wife. That evening, the 3 dined quietly together, no banquet, only shared laughter and whispered promises. Yet as candlelight flickered across Amelia's face, Edward felt a pang. For though his love was true, his identity remained cloaked. She believed she had married a trainee solicitor. She did not know she had married the heir to Whitmore and Company, one of the wealthiest men in the city. Later, Edward turned to Margaret, voice low with guilt. "What if she finds out? What if she feels betrayed?" "She will understand," Margaret replied, placing a firm hand on his. "You did not deceive to manipulate. You loved her first. That is what matters." Edward nodded, but the guilt refused to leave. Amelia Clark returned to Whitmore and Company the Monday after her quiet wedding with the same graceful composure she had always carried. She wore no flashy jewelry, no sign of her changed status, only the same understated blouses and neatly pinned hair. To her colleagues, she was still the diligent junior associate who worked late and rarely sought the limelight. What they did not know was that she was now Mrs. Whitmore. Lucy Patterson, however, had grown more restless than ever. Weeks of simmering envy had curdled into malice. She had watched Amelia rise from quiet obscurity into something more, respected, admired, noticed. In Luce's eyes, Amelia's confidence was a threat that had to be extinguished. The opportunity came one damp afternoon, when the partners gathered for a case review. Files were stacked high on the mahogany table, rain streaking the tall windows that overlooked the Thames. Lucy stood abruptly, clutching a folder thick with printed emails. "I have something serious to report," she announced, her voice carrying just enough to silence the room. She dropped the folder onto the table with a theatrical thud. "These documents prove Amelia Clark has been leaking confidential information to rival firms. The evidence is here in black and white." Gasps rippled through the room. Senior solicitors exchanged alarmed glances, whispers darting like arrows. Amelia's face drained of color. "That isn't true," she said quietly, though her words barely reached beyond the heavy silence. "Check the metadata," Lucy urged, a triumphant smirk tugging at her lips. "Her name is all over it." From across the room, Edward clenched his fists beneath the desk. Still in the disguise of a trainee, he could not yet reveal his authority, but his eyes burned with fury. That evening, when the others had gone, he approached Amelia at her desk. "I believe you," he said softly. She looked up, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Thank you. But belief may not be enough this time." Margaret was already moving her invisible chess pieces. Though she still swept floors in her disguise, her influence had never waned. She called in discreet favors, a trusted private investigator, a sympathetic IT consultant. Slowly, evidence began to emerge. The timestamps on the supposed leaks were inconsistent, the logins traced back not to Amelia's account but to Luce's. Still, proof needed to be irrefutable. The following day, Amelia was summoned to meet Mr. Whitmore, James Fletcher, still posing as the firm's principal. Lucy accompanied her, smug certainty plastered across her face. "We consider this a grave matter," James said, flipping through the forged emails with deliberate calm. "You see," Lucy interjected sweetly, "the trail leads directly to her." But James did not give her the victory she expected. "This will be investigated thoroughly," he said simply. "Dismissed." Lucy's smile faltered, though she masked it quickly. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Something was shifting. That evening, rain misted over the pavements as Amelia sat at her desk, head in her hands. Edward stood nearby, silent, steady. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I won't let you face it alone." The night dragged on. The air in the office was thick with unspoken suspicion, the corridors heavy with whispers. Amelia moved like a shadow, graceful but weary. Her name, her very reputation, now dangled precariously. Edward, pacing quietly in the corner, knew the time for concealment was drawing to an end. To protect Amelia, he might have to risk everything. Later that night, as Amelia passed the conference room, she overheard voices through the slightly ajar door. She froze, listening. "I can't keep this up," Edward's voice said, steady yet burdened. "Amelia doesn't deserve this. I've tried to tell her who I am, but she didn't believe me. And now that we're married, I can't let her live in a lie." There was a pause, then James's voice, hushed but firm. "Sir, revealing yourself now, especially with the firm under this kind of pressure, could complicate everything." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Sir." She pressed herself back against the wall as Edward's voice continued, heavy with truth. "I am Edward Whitmore, the real heir, the one everyone has been waiting to meet. I've been here all along." The words struck like a thunderclap. Amelia staggered back silently, heart racing. The puzzle pieces fell into place. His confidence in court strategies, Margaret's strange insistence on their marriage, his protectiveness that never seemed ordinary for a trainee. He hadn't been pretending to be someone else. He'd been pretending to be less. That night, Edward returned to their flat to find Amelia waiting in silence. The lights were low, her figure outlined against the window. "You're home," she said softly, not looking at him. "Amelia?" he asked, cautious. She turned, her eyes unreadable. "You're Edward Whitmore, aren't you?" There was no escape in his silence, only confirmation. "Yes," he admitted, his voice a whisper. "I am." Her lips trembled. "And you married me without telling me. You let me believe I'd pledged myself to a poor trainee." "I tried to tell you," he said, stepping forward, "but you wouldn't believe me. And I was terrified of losing you. I needed to know you loved me for me." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "And now I don't know what to feel." He stopped a pace away, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I love you. That is the only truth that matters. I'll accept whatever you decide. Just know I never meant to hurt you." After a long silence, Amelia whispered, "I need time. But I'm not leaving. Not yet." Relief washed across his face. "Then I'll wait," he breathed. "For as long as it takes." The morning after Amelia discovered the truth, Whitmore and company bustled as though nothing had changed. Clerks hurried with files, partners discussed strategy over coffee, and junior solicitors whispered behind their hands. To them, Amelia Clark remained a junior associate, and Edward was still just another trainee. Only she carried the knowledge that the man she had married was not merely her colleague, but the heir to the very chambers in which they worked. Lucy Patterson, still restless with envy, refused to let the previous accusations fade. She gathered her allies, whispering venom in the tea room. "She'll be out before long. Just wait. Mr. Whitmore will see she doesn't belong here." By that afternoon, Lucy rose during a routine meeting, clutching yet another folder. Her eyes gleamed with triumph as she announced, "I have further proof of Amelia Clark's betrayal. Emails confirming she leaked client documents. It's all here." Gasps swept the room again. Amelia, though her heart hammered, stood calm this time. She had no defense ready, but she no longer needed one. From the back of the room came the scrape of a chair. Margaret Whitmore entered, no longer in disguise as a cleaner but standing tall in her true authority. Her grey suit was immaculate, her pearl brooch gleaming. The room fell into stunned silence. "Before this circus continues," Margaret said, her voice firm and measured, "I think it's time the truth came to light." She distributed a set of documents, her movements steady. Server logs, access records, security footage, each page pointing unerringly not to Amelia, but to Lucy. "This," Margaret declared, "is the real evidence. The supposed leaks were fabricated. The only person who accessed these files out of hours was you, Miss Patterson." Lucy's face drained of color. This is fabricated," she stammered. But another voice rang out. James Fletcher, still playing the role of Mr. Whitmore, stepped forward with cold authority. "Actually, Lucy, we had your system audited. The digital trail is undeniable. You framed an innocent colleague." Lucy's protests grew shrill. "You can't prove." The conference room doors opened once more. Another woman entered, Leah Martin, a solicitor with her own grudges, her expression guilty and subdued. "You can," she said quietly. "Because I helped her. I gave her access. I thought if I supported Lucy, perhaps I could win Edward's attention again." The confession landed like a hammer. Murmurs erupted, colleagues turning wide-eyed from Amelia to Lucy. At that moment, Edward rose. This time, there was no disguise, no false modesty. He straightened his jacket, his presence commanding. "Enough," he said simply. The room hushed. "I am Edward Whitmore," he continued, his voice calm but resolute. "I've been here, not as a trainee, but as myself, watching and learning. And Amelia," he turned towards her, his gaze steady, "is not only innocent, she is my wife." The declaration thundered through the chambers. Shock rippled outward. Some mouths fell open, others scrambled to apologize. Lucy stumbled back, her bravado crumbling. Margaret's tone was merciless. "Effective immediately, Miss Patterson, you are dismissed. And Miss Martin, you will answer for your part in this deception." Security escorted them out, their heels clicking against the marble floor like a fading echo of misplaced ambition. Silence lingered until Amelia spoke, her voice calm, carrying more weight than she knew. "This was never about me being married to Edward Whitmore. Respect and kindness should not depend on someone's title or fortune. They should be given simply because they are right." Edward turned to her, his eyes filled with pride. "And that," he said softly, "is why you belong here more than anyone." The mood shifted. Those who had doubted Amelia now nodded in quiet respect. For the first time in weeks, peace settled over Whitmore and company. Later that evening, Amelia found herself in Edward's office. The city lights glowed outside the tall windows, streaking the room with gold. He reached for her hand, pressing it gently to his lips. "Thank you for standing by me," she whispered. "Always," he replied, his voice low but certain. Outside, London roared with its usual clamor. Taxis on wet streets, voices echoing from pubs, the restless hum of a city that never truly paused. But inside Whitmore and company, something had finally stilled. Amelia was no longer simply a junior associate, nor merely Edward's wife. She was a woman who had endured whispers, betrayal, and accusations, and had answered them with truth and quiet strength. And Edward, the man who had once hidden behind a modest badge, now stood beside her openly. Together, They would shape the firm's future, not with arrogance, but with integrity. As Margaret watched them from the doorway, her lips curved into the faintest smile. Her mission, for now, was complete.